I'm Kate Sprague, and this is Getting Started in VR Game Development, Online Resources and Common Pitfalls. So who am I? I'm a computer science undergrad. I'm currently trying to transfer to UW Bothell. I'm a hacker, a maker, a tinkerer, and a virtual reality evangelist. And so far, I think I've converted 10 people? About 10 people. And by what I mean by that, I drag them to my house, I put the headset on them, and then I introduce them to VR, and hopefully they like it. I haven't had anyone not, so here's hoping they continue to. Let's see. Okay, good. Sorry, technical error. So scope of the talk, it's going to be very broad. It's going to be beginner, so if you have already dealt with this, I'm sorry. Continue to listen for a couple minutes. It'll be over quickly. So why VR? What's the big deal with VR? Well, people are building transformative content. This quote from John Patrick Pullen from Time Magazine, he recently tried a bunch of VR technology and has said that it fundamentally changed the way he communicates with his wife and his children, and that VR is basically the next huge media thing that is not a big thing yet, so get in on the ground floor. So how do you do that? Well, you can technically do Unreal or Unity, whichever you're more comfortable in. If you're a beginner though and you've never dealt with any programming or any game engine before, I'd highly recommend checking out Unity. It's very user-friendly UI, very beginner-oriented. So how you do that, you go to the Unity website, you download the most current version, 5.3.5, and then go do some tutorials. The one I recommend right now is the Rollerball tutorial. Very simple. Basically, you make a game where you have a platform, you have a ball in the middle of the platform, you can kind of see it up in the background there. There's a bunch of little yellow boxes. You hit the yellow boxes with the ball. That's basically the tutorial in the game. So why is that a good idea? Because Oculus actually has a tutorial for modifying the Rollerball game into VR. So it's a very good intro, first to Unity and then to Oculus. If you're interested in the HTC Vive, there is also a lovely tutorial, and it's less about rollerball and more about hit the ball, because there are controllers. So there is a link there, and there is also the link to the actual website where that tutorial is, because it's not official. It's at the VR Dev School, and that is a picture of what it actually looks like when you're in Unity and programming the lovely hit the ball game. So let's go into resources. What are some really good resources for VR online? Well, it's a really new technology, and outside of the companies, there's not a lot yet outside of Google tutorials, or excuse me, YouTube tutorials, sorry. So there is, however, a lovely convention up in, Tacoma, up in Toronto, it's another T word. It's the big list of virtual reality resources is on their website. There's a link to it there. Google has a lot of really good VR resources, not just for their Google VR headsets. The Unity 3D community boards have a huge amount of VR help, and since I've already recommended Unity, I'm going to plug that. There's a bunch of really cool things on YouTube. For instance, just a couple of weeks ago, there was an Intel developer meetup slash, what's it called? They call them something else, and I can't remember what they're called right now, but it's part of the Intel Developer Zone technology thing. They try to introduce you to their technology that helps you build in VR. And they are specifically trying to get people interested in their GPA, which I will mention later in this talk. And there's also this lovely talk, which is VR for Indies. So if you're on a budget or you really have no experience, this is a wonderful talk that talks a little bit more in broad strokes about how to develop for VR. So Oculus Rift specific things, this is fairly obvious, but for beginners. Developer at Oculus portal. You have the forums at Oculus. You have a subreddit for Oculus. There is a really good website called VR Focus. It's on YouTube. It's a channel. And what they do is a little bit of entertainment, reviews about games and demos, but they also do tutorials. And actually, the Wild West of VR, Discovering Rules of Oculus Rift Development, is on that page as well. So go check that out if you're an Oculus Rift person. If you're an HTC Vive person, we're going to go back to the community. There's a Steam community resource board for the hardware, and then there's the actual just VR discussions for everyone. There's the software API, there's the HTC Vive and the HTC Dev websites, in case you're not really interested in just games and you want to use the Vive for something else. And then, of course, the subreddit for Vive, because it's very active and very interesting. So, Common Pitfalls. We're going to talk about game development for just a second. So this is kind of, if you're not super familiar with game development, the flow chart, if you will. It's not strict, it's just an overview. But in general, you get the budget, you do the picking of the release, you build the game, you market the game, you do the licensing, et cetera, you have a game. And one of the things that is interesting to me is that VR has new pitfalls, because there were already always the game development pitfalls, but VR adds another level of complexity. So the number one thing that you need to remember about developing, which you may already know, is that you need to stick to 90 frames per second as closely as possible. I have seen people have demos that have gone down to about 40 frames per second. Really bad and gets people really sick really fast. Because the FPS and the motion sickness are basically inversely correlated. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Okay, so what's cool about the different major devices as far as headsets, Oculus and HTC. HTC actually has a tool that they put into the development of the Steam VR. It's called frame timing. And what it is, if you see up here in the corner, that is it on the headset. So you can actually see it on the 2D screen while you're developing your game. But you can also wear the headset and actually go in and see both your GPU and the CPU frame rates, essentially. And if you see a spike, you can mess with that. Oculus does things a little differently. They don't really have graphing actually in the headset or on the monitor as far as I can tell. I do have to warn you, I only have an HTC Vive. I've done demos on the Oculus, but mostly I'm with HTC. So with Oculus, if you notice, there are two letters on the screen. What they do is when you're actually wearing or demoing the game, there are a bunch of different letters that appear on the screen. It's L, F, U, and C. If you have L, it's lag. If you have F, it's frame rate errors because of your application somehow. If you do C, it's something with your compositor with frame rate issues. I can't remember quite what that is. And then U is just unknown, which is, you know, figure it out. And both of those links go to those sites. UI, UX, very briefly, I'm just going to say it's a new world out there and it's really interesting. I'm concentrating here with the HTC Vive because we don't have controllers yet in wide production for the Oculus. So in the HTC Vive, you'll notice really good UI. They use the controllers more as the tutorial implementation instead of just putting text on a wall. It's really cool. Marketing. Just be aware for marketing, because we don't really have a fix for this yet, that no matter what 3D experience you make, you are going to need to market it in 2D. And it's a completely different, situation. So heads up, everyone. And that's my presentation. This is my contact, and that's my corgi. And yeah, that's everything.